When I first started learning English, it felt like a giant mountain I couldn't climb. I didn't understand even the simplest words, and every time someone spoke English, it felt like they were speaking a completely different language. And you know what? That's exactly how many beginners feel when they start learning English. I remember the first time I tried to read an English sentence. It was just one short line, but it took me forever. I didn't know where to start, and I was scared of getting everything wrong. But here's something important. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. That's what Mark Twain said, and he was right. The most important thing is just to start, no matter how scary or difficult it seems at first. I want to tell you about one of the biggest struggles I faced as a beginner. I was so scared of making mistakes. Every time I tried to say something in English, I would freeze. I was terrified that people would laugh at me or that I would sound silly. Have you ever felt that way? If so, you're not alone. Many beginners struggle with the fear of speaking, but here's the secret. Making mistakes is part of the process. Nobody speaks perfectly from the start, and that's okay. The more you practice, the better you'll get. And trust me, the more mistakes you make, the more you learn. So don't be afraid to try, even if you mess up. It's all part of the journey. I want to give you a little tip that really helped me when I was starting. One of the first things I did was set small goals for myself. Instead of trying to learn everything at once, I focused on just one small thing each day. Maybe it was learning 5 new words or practicing one sentence. This made learning feel easier and less scary. You can try the same thing. Set a small goal today, like speaking in English for just 5 minutes, even if it's just to yourself. It's important to use resources that are designed for beginners, like the podcasts I've uploaded, which make learning fun and simple. Here's another struggle I faced. Understanding spoken English. People spoke so fast that I couldn't catch a single word. I would listen to English podcasts or TV shows and feel completely lost. If you've ever felt like this, you're not alone. Many beginners struggle with listening and understanding, especially when native speakers talk quickly. What helped me was starting with slow, clear audio meant for beginners. I would listen to the same podcast or story over and over again, focusing on one sentence at a time. Gradually, my ears started getting used to the sounds, and I started understanding more. You can find some great beginner-friendly podcasts on my website, which are perfect for practicing your listening skills. And here's another important quote that helped me push through the tough times. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. That's from Winston Churchill. And it's a reminder that you don't have to be perfect right away. The most important thing is to keep going, even when it feels hard. So, what's the lesson from my first chapter? It's that you don't need to know everything to start learning English. All you need is the courage to begin, to make mistakes, and to learn from them. Start small, practice every day, and most importantly, believe in yourself. You'll get better with time, and I'm here to help you along the way. Chapter 2: Overcoming the Fear of Speaking. Welcome back. In the first chapter, we talked about the beginning of the journey to learn English and the challenges that beginners face with understanding basic words. Now let's dive into the next big struggle that many learners, including myself, face. The fear of speaking. When I first started learning English, I was terrified to speak. Maybe you feel the same way. You know the words in your head, but when it's time to speak, you freeze. Your heart races, and your mind goes blank. It's like all the words disappear the moment you need them most. You worry about sounding silly or worse, people not understanding you at all. But here's the truth. Everyone who learns a new language feels this way at first. It's completely normal. Even native speakers sometimes stumble over their words. The key to overcoming this fear is to remember that making mistakes is part of the process, and the more you speak, the easier it gets. But how do you get started when speaking feels so scary? Let me share a simple technique that helped me. Speaking in front of a mirror. Yes, it sounds strange, but it's powerful. When you practice speaking to yourself in the mirror, you see your expressions, hear your voice, and get used to the idea of talking in English. Start with simple phrases like, "Hello, my name is," or "How are you?" Repeat them every day until they feel natural. The mirror becomes your safe space where no one is judging you. Here's another technique: shadowing. This is where you listen to someone speak and try to copy their words, tone, and speed. You don't need to worry about being perfect. Just repeat what they say, like a shadow following someone. I found this extremely helpful when I was too shy to speak on my own. You can try this with podcasts, like the ones on the Story Speak Online. Just listen to a sentence, pause, and repeat it out loud. It helps you build confidence and fluency at the same time. Do not worry about mistakes. Making things up is the secret of all art. Joseph Conrad. This quote reminds us that mistakes are not something to be afraid of. They're a sign of progress. Every time you speak, even if you make mistakes, you're one step closer to fluency. Now let's talk about a big fear for many beginners: pronunciation. You might worry that your accent is too strong or that people won't understand you. But here's the thing. Your accent is part of who you are, and it's okay. People will still understand you as long as you speak clearly. And remember, even native speakers have different accents. The goal isn't to sound perfect, it's to communicate. One way to improve your pronunciation without pressure is to practice with recordings. Record yourself speaking a few sentences, then listen to the recording. Don't judge yourself too harshly. Instead, notice areas where you can improve. Over time, you'll hear your own progress. And trust me, there's nothing more motivating than hearing yourself get better with each practice session. Let me tell you about a student of mine named Sarah. She was so afraid of speaking English that she would only write notes to people, never daring to say a word out loud. But then I introduced her to the mirror technique and shadowing. Slowly, Sarah started speaking to herself every day, and before she knew it, she was having conversations with her classmates. Yes, she made mistakes, but each conversation made her more confident. Now she speaks English without fear. Here's a small challenge for you. Set a goal to speak in English for 5 minutes every day. You can start with simple words, phrases, or even just reading out loud. If you don't feel ready to talk to someone else, start with yourself. The key is to get used to hearing your own voice in English. You'll be amazed at how much progress you can make with just 5 minutes a day. Also, don't forget to practice listening while you're working on your speaking skills. The more you listen, the better your speaking will become. You'll start to notice how native speakers structure their sentences, the words they use, and the way they pronounce things. This will help you speak more naturally. Again, you can find plenty of beginner-level podcasts on speak.online to help you with this. Before I end this chapter, I want to leave you with one more thought. Speaking is the bridge between learning and mastering English. Don't let fear stop you from crossing that bridge. The more you speak, the more confident you'll become, and soon, speaking English will feel as natural as speaking your native language. Chapter 3: The Importance of Listening. Welcome back. In this chapter, I want to share a powerful secret that can make all the difference in your English journey. Listening. If you want to speak English well, you must first learn to listen carefully. But I don't mean just hearing words. I mean active listening, where you really focus and pay attention to what you hear. When I started learning English, I didn't realize how important listening was. I thought speaking was the only thing that mattered. But then, something changed. I began to listen to English every day, whether it was podcasts, songs, or even short conversations between native speakers. And slowly, I started to understand more. Listening helped me get used to the flow of the language, how words connect, and the sounds of English. It was like my brain was soaking up all the patterns of the language. Let me share a tip with you. Listening doesn't mean you have to understand everything. At first, it's normal to miss words or not know what's being said. But that's okay. The more you listen, the more familiar the words will become. Think of it like learning to swim. At first, the water feels overwhelming, but the more time you spend in it, the more comfortable you become. Here's how listening can change the way you learn. Pronunciation. When you listen, you get used to how words are pronounced. This will help you sound more natural when you speak. Vocabulary. Even if you don't understand every word, your brain is still picking up new words and how they're used in sentences. Confidence. The more you hear English, the more confident you'll feel speaking it. Listening helps you realize that English isn't as scary as it seems. I used to listen to English songs and repeat the lyrics. It didn't matter if I understood them at first. What mattered was hearing the rhythm of the language. Later, when I did understand the words, I realized how much listening had helped me. Here's something fun you can do to practice. Shadowing. Shadowing means listening to someone speak and trying to repeat what they say as closely as possible. Just listen to a short sentence, pause, and repeat it out loud. Don't worry if it's not perfect at first. The goal is to mimic the sounds and practice speaking without overthinking. The more that you listen, the more that you learn. Listening is like filling your mind with the right tools, and over time, these tools will help you speak more fluently. I remember a quote by Stephen Covey. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. This quote changed how I approached listening. Instead of just hearing words, I began to listen carefully, trying to understand how the speaker formed sentences, used tone, and expressed ideas. This made a huge difference in how I learned English. Listening also helped me overcome the next big challenge, speaking without fear. In the next chapter, we'll dive into how you can speak confidently without worrying about mistakes. So, here's your challenge for today. Listen to something in English. It could be a podcast, a short video, or even a song. Focus on the sounds, the rhythm, and how the speaker connects words. Try shadowing, and don't worry if you don't understand every word. Chapter 4. Tackling Grammar Confusion. Welcome back. We've discussed how listening, speaking, and vocabulary practice are crucial steps in learning English. Now let's address one of the biggest struggles for many beginners, grammar. If grammar confuses you, don't worry. You're not alone. It can seem like a giant puzzle, but with the right techniques, you'll soon find that grammar becomes clearer. When I first started learning English, grammar felt overwhelming. There were so many rules, verb tenses, plurals, sentence structure, and don't get me started on prepositions. I remember reading sentences and not understanding why certain words were placed where they were. It felt like I was trying to solve a mystery with no clues. And let's face it, memorizing grammar rules can be boring. But here's the good news. You don't need to memorize every single rule to speak English well. In fact, one of the secrets to mastering grammar is learning it through context, not by studying rules. Let me explain. Learning grammar naturally. Instead of focusing on grammar rules, try to immerse yourself in the language. When you read stories or listen to podcasts, pay attention to how sentences are structured. You'll notice patterns. For example, you'll see how the past tense is used in stories or how questions are formed in conversations. The more you expose yourself to these patterns, the more naturally they'll come to you. A technique that really helped me is called shadowing. Remember when we talked about shadowing in Chapter 2? It's when you listen to someone speaking and repeat what they say, mimicking their pronunciation and intonation. Well, shadowing is also great for learning grammar. By repeating sentences, you're naturally absorbing grammar without even realizing it. Simple sentences. First, another helpful tip is to start with simple sentences. Don't worry about complex sentence structures at first. Focus on mastering basic sentences like, I am going to the store or she likes to read. Once you're comfortable with these, you can start experimenting with more complicated ones. Here's a secret. Even fluent English speakers sometimes get grammar wrong, especially when speaking quickly. The key is communication, not perfection. Don't get stuck on making every sentence perfect. Just focus on getting your message across. The more you speak, the better your grammar will get. Common grammar struggles and solutions. Let's talk about a few common grammar struggles beginners face and how to overcome them. Verb tenses. Many beginners struggle with choosing the right verb tense, e.g., past, present, future. Solution. Instead of memorizing all the tenses at once, focus on the most common ones. Present simple. I read. Past simple. I read yesterday. And future simple. I will read tomorrow. Practice these in daily conversations or writing. Prepositions. Words like in, on, at, and for can be tricky because their use doesn't always follow the same logic as in other languages. Solution. Learn prepositions in phrases, not as individual words. For example, on Monday, in the morning, at the store. The more you use them in context, the easier they'll become. Articles. A and the. Choosing the right article can be confusing. Solution. A simple rule to remember. Use a or an when referring to something for the first time, e.g., I saw a cat, and the when the listener knows what you're talking about, e.g., the cat was black. Learn by doing grammar is best learned through doing. Practice is your best friend. Start by writing short sentences every day. Write about your day, your plans, or even your thoughts. You don't need to write a novel. Just a few sentences will do. Then read them aloud to yourself, paying attention to how the words sound together. When you read or listen to English, try to notice the grammar. Don't worry about understanding every rule. Just be curious. For example, if you see a sentence like, I've been waiting for an hour, try to figure out why the speaker used I've been instead of I am. This kind of curiosity will help you learn grammar naturally. Quotes on learning. Here's a quote that really inspired me when I was struggling with grammar. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Confucius. This reminds us that learning takes time, and it's okay to go slowly. The important thing is to keep moving forward. Use resources to help you. There are plenty of resources that can help you practice grammar without getting overwhelmed. You can also use grammar apps, read simple stories, or watch videos designed for English learners. Here's another technique that worked for me. Correct your own sentences. After writing or speaking, go back and check for mistakes. Don't be too hard on yourself. Just treat it like a fun puzzle. Over time, you'll start making fewer mistakes. Your challenge. Here's your grammar challenge. Pick 1 or 2 grammar points, like verb tenses or prepositions, and focus on using them correctly for the next week. Don't worry about mastering everything at once. Just take it one step at a time. Write a few sentences each day, and try to notice these grammar points when you listen to English. Remember, grammar doesn't have to be a struggle. It's just another part of the journey, and with time and practice, it will start to make sense. In the next chapter, we'll talk about another secret to improving your English, building a solid routine. Until then, keep practicing and keep believing in yourself. Chapter 5. The Power of Reading. Welcome back. You've already learned about confidence, listening, speaking, and repetition. Now let's dive into a technique that will greatly improve your vocabulary and overall understanding of English. Reading. Reading is not just about recognizing words on a page. It's about understanding how those words fit together, building your vocabulary, and helping you express yourself better in English. When I first started learning English, I thought reading was too difficult. I didn't know many words, and it felt frustrating to not understand everything. But over time, I realized something important. You don't have to understand every word to benefit from reading. Even if you only understand a few words, you're still learning. Each sentence you read helps your brain get used to how English works. One of the biggest struggles beginners face is seeing unfamiliar words and feeling lost. But here's the secret. Context is your best friend. You don't need to know every word to get the general meaning of a sentence. Just keep reading, and you'll pick up new words naturally. Over time, those strange words will start to feel familiar. There's a famous quote by Dr. Seuss that fits perfectly here. The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Reading helps you open doors to new ideas, new words, and new ways of thinking. Words and new ways of thinking. Reading techniques for beginners. So how can you use reading to improve your English? Let me share some simple techniques that helped me on my journey. Start with simple books. Don't jump into complicated novels right away. Start with books that are written for beginners or children. These books use simple language, and they're designed to help learners like you. Read aloud. Reading out loud is a great way to practice both reading and speaking at the same time. When you read aloud, you're not just seeing the words, you're hearing them too. This helps with pronunciation and builds your confidence in speaking English. Try reading a few sentences each day, focusing on saying the words clearly. It might feel strange at first, but trust me, it's very effective. Use context to guess meanings. Don't worry if you don't know every word. Look at the sentence around the word and try to guess its meaning from the context. For example, if you read, "The cat is very small," but you don't know the word small, you can guess it means something like not big based on the rest of the sentence. Over time, you'll get better at guessing meanings without needing to look up every word. Build vocabulary lists. Every time you come across a new word, write it down in a notebook. Try to use the new word in a sentence or find other examples of it being used. This helps you remember the word better. You can even create flashcards with new words on one side and their meanings on the other. Review them regularly to help the words stick in your memory. Shadow reading. Shadowing isn't just for listening, it works for reading too. Pick a short passage, read it, and then try to repeat the sentences without looking. This helps reinforce the sentence structures and builds fluency. Again, you can practice shadow reading with the stories. They're designed to help you improve at your own pace. Overcoming common reading struggles. Now, let's talk about some common struggles beginners face when reading and how to overcome them. Struggle 1. Not understanding everything. Solution: don't focus on perfection. It's okay if you don't understand every word. The goal is to get the general meaning and learn a little more with each reading session. Struggle 2. Feeling overwhelmed. Solution: start small. You don't need to read long chapters or difficult texts. Start with a few sentences or a short story each day. Celebrate small victories and enjoy the process. Struggle 3. Losing motivation. Solution: choose reading materials that interest you. Whether it's a story, a news article, or a blog post, pick something you enjoy. When you're interested in the topic, reading feels less like work and more like fun. Why reading is essential for fluency. Reading helps you build your vocabulary, understand grammar naturally, and get used to how English sentences are structured. When you read regularly, you start to recognize patterns in the language. You'll notice how sentences flow, how words fit together, and how ideas are expressed. This is key to becoming more fluent. Another great thing about reading is that it improves your writing skills as well. The more you read, the better you'll get at writing in English, because you'll be familiar with how native speakers use the language. Challenge for this chapter. Your challenge this week is to read for 10 minutes every day. Pick something simple and interesting, like a short story or article, and read it aloud. If you're unsure where to start, check out the stories on The Story. They're perfect for beginners like you. Chapter 6. Tackling Vocabulary and Pronunciation Problems. Welcome back to our journey of learning English together. So far, we've tackled many struggles, understanding, speaking, and listening. But now, let's talk about one of the most frustrating challenges for beginners: vocabulary and pronunciation. I remember when I first started learning English. There were so many new words that I didn't know. It felt like every time I learned a word, there were 10 more that I didn't know yet. And to make it harder, some words sounded so strange to me. Pronunciation was a huge challenge, and I wasn't sure if I was saying the words correctly. But don't worry. Vocabulary and pronunciation are problems that can be overcome with simple techniques. Let's break them down. Struggle 1. Not knowing enough words. When you're just starting to learn English, the number of words can feel overwhelming. You might feel like you need to know thousands of words before you can even have a conversation. But here's a secret. You don't need to know every word. The most important thing is to start with the words that you'll use the most. For example, start by learning the names of everyday objects around you, like book, table, pen, and phone. You can also focus on common action words like go, eat, sleep, and talk. One technique that helped me a lot is flashcards. I made small cards with the English word on one side and the meaning or picture on the other. I carried them with me and practiced whenever I had a few minutes. You can also use apps like Duolingo or Memrise, which turn vocabulary practice into a fun game. Struggle 2. Forgetting new words. It's one thing to learn new words, but remembering them is a whole different challenge. I would learn a word one day, and by the next day, I had already forgotten it. This can be frustrating, but here's the good news. It's normal. To remember new words, you have to use them as much as possible. Here's what worked for me. Every time I learned a new word, I would try to use it in a sentence at least 3 times that day. For example, if I learned the word comfortable, I'd say things like, "This chair is comfortable. I feel comfortable here." Or, "Is this bed comfortable?" The more you use a word, the more your brain remembers it. And if you forget a word, no worries. Just practice it again until it sticks. Struggle 3. Pronunciation problems. Let's be honest. English pronunciation can be really tricky. Some words look completely different from how they sound. For example, the word enough sounds like enough, and knife is pronounced without the K sound. This can be confusing, but there's a way to fix it. One technique that helped me a lot is shadowing. Remember shadowing? It's when you listen to a native English speaker and try to repeat exactly what they say, mimicking their pronunciation and tone. This works great for pronunciation practice. Pause the audio and repeat the sentences out loud. You'll notice that with time, your pronunciation improves. Another great tip is to practice the sounds that are most difficult for you. For example, if you struggle with the th sound, spend a few minutes each day just practicing that sound. Stand in front of a mirror and say words like think, thank, and thirst. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. Struggle 4. Different accents. English is spoken in many countries, and everyone has a different accent. This can make pronunciation even harder, because the same word might sound different depending on who is speaking. Don't let this confuse you. It's okay to have an accent. In fact, everyone has an accent when speaking a new language, and it's part of what makes language learning interesting. Focus on clarity, not perfection. Your goal is to be understood, not to sound like a native speaker. The more confident you are in your pronunciation, the more others will understand you, even if your accent is different from theirs. Quote for motivation. There's a great quote by Nelson Mandela that perfectly fits this chapter. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. This reminds us that learning English is not just about words. It's about connecting with people. Don't worry about speaking perfectly. Focus on communicating, and the words and pronunciation will follow. Challenge for you today. I want you to pick 5 new words and practice them using the flashcard method. Then, try to use each word at least 3 times in conversation. If you're feeling confident, try shadowing a short podcast or video and repeat what you hear. Remember, It's okay if you don't sound perfect right away. The important thing is to keep practicing. And don't forget, if you need help with pronunciation or vocabulary, check out my podcasts. There are plenty of stories and lessons designed to help you improve step by step. Chapter 7: Staying Consistent and Building a Routine. Welcome back. We're now nearing the final stages of my English learning journey. In this chapter, I'm going to share one of the biggest secrets to success in learning English, or any language. Consistency. When I was learning English, I often found myself motivated at first. But after a few days or weeks, the excitement faded. Sound familiar? This is something many learners experience, but here's the truth. Learning a language is not about working hard for a few days and then giving up. It's about showing up every single day, even for just a few minutes. Why consistency is key. Imagine you're planting a tree. If you water it once and expect it to grow tall overnight, you'll be disappointed. But if you water it a little every day, over time, it will grow strong and tall. That's how learning works. You don't have to spend hours studying English in one day. It's much better to spend 10 or 15 minutes practicing every day. These small, regular actions are what lead to real progress. My consistency struggle. There were days when I didn't feel like practicing. Maybe I was tired or busy with other things. But then I reminded myself, the more consistent I am, the faster I'll improve. Even on the days when I didn't feel like learning, I would do something small. Listen to an English podcast, read a page of a book, or speak a few sentences to myself. Those little efforts added up over time. One of the best things I did was create a routine. I set aside time every morning to practice, even if it was just 10 minutes. After breakfast, I would listen to a podcast or practice speaking. Over time, this became a habit. I didn't have to think about it. It became part of my day. Here's a quote from Anthony Robbins. It's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives, but what we do consistently. This is especially true when learning English. The small daily efforts are what bring you closer to fluency. Tips for staying consistent. Let me share some tips that helped me stay consistent. Set small, achievable goals. Don't overwhelm yourself with big tasks. Start small. Set a goal to practice English for 5 or 10 minutes a day. Once you achieve that, you can increase the time, but make sure the goal is manageable. Make a schedule. Just like brushing your teeth or having lunch, make learning English a regular part of your day. Choose a time, morning, afternoon, or evening, and stick to it. Over time, it will become a habit. Mix up your practice. Variety is important. Some days you might want to listen to a podcast, like the ones I've uploaded on the Story Speak. Other days, you can read a story, write a short paragraph, or speak with a friend. Changing your activities will keep your learning interesting. Track your progress. Keeping a journal where you write what you practiced each day is a great motivator. It helps you see how far you've come. Some days you might feel like you're not improving, but when you look back at your progress, you'll see that you've made huge strides. Reward yourself. Celebrate the small wins. If you practiced every day for a week, give yourself a reward. This will keep you motivated and excited to keep going. Common problems and solutions. Consistency can be hard to maintain, especially when life gets busy. Here are some problems beginners face and how to solve them. Problem 1. Feeling demotivated. Some days you might feel like you're not improving fast enough, and that can make you want to quit. Solution. Focus on small improvements. Instead of worrying about being fluent, celebrate the small things, like learning a new word or speaking a little more confidently. Problem 2. Lack of time. It can feel like there's no time in the day to practice. Solution. Find 5 to 10 minutes, even if it's while you're cooking, walking, or getting ready. You can practice by listening to English podcasts or repeating sentences to yourself. It's better to do a little than nothing at all. Problem 3. Boredom. Doing the same thing every day can get boring. Solution. Switch up your practice. Some days, listen to a podcast. Other days, write something or have a short conversation in English. Keep it fresh. Real-life examples. One of my students, James, struggled with consistency at first. He would practice for a few days, but then stop for weeks. I encouraged him to try the 5-minute rule. He started by practicing for just 5 minutes every day. Once it became a habit, he increased it to 10 and then 15 minutes. Within a few months, his English improved significantly, and he was speaking with much more confidence. Another student, Sarah, used to get bored quickly. She didn't like doing the same exercises every day, so I suggested she mix it up. Some days, she would read an English story, and other days, she would watch a short video in English or have a conversation with a friend. By changing her routine, she found the motivation to keep practicing regularly. Consistency builds confidence. Remember, the more consistent you are, the more confident you'll become. The fear of making mistakes will slowly disappear because you're practicing every day. You'll start to notice that words come more easily, and speaking will feel more natural. Consistency is the key to building fluency and confidence. Before we move on to the next chapter, I want to give you a small challenge. Starting today, commit to practicing English for at least 5 minutes every day for the next week. It can be anything: reading, listening, speaking, or writing. Keep it simple, but make sure you do it daily. Chapter 8. Confidence is the key. Welcome to the final chapter of my story on learning English. By now, you've heard about my struggles, my techniques, and how I overcame the obstacles in learning this language. But I've saved the most important lesson for last. Today, we are going to talk about confidence, the ultimate key to mastering English. When I started learning English, I thought knowing more words or perfect grammar was the secret to fluency. But along the way, I realized something important. Confidence is the true foundation of fluency. Without confidence, all the words, grammar, and techniques in the world won't help you speak well. When you're confident, you can speak even when you make mistakes, and that's what really makes you fluent. You might wonder, but how do I build confidence if I'm just a beginner? Well, let me tell you a secret. Confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. This quote perfectly describes the journey to learning English. You must keep going even when it feels hard or when you make mistakes, because every mistake brings you one step closer to success. The fear of speaking. In the beginning, one of my biggest challenges was the fear of speaking in English. I worried that I would sound silly, that people would laugh, or that I wouldn't find the right words. But here's what I learned. Everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers. They're not perfect, and neither do you have to be. The key is to practice speaking as often as you can. You can start small, maybe just 5 minutes a day. Try speaking out loud to yourself, or record your voice talking about something simple, like your daily routine. The more you hear yourself speak, the more comfortable you will become. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. Facing the fear of making mistakes. Another thing that holds many beginners back is the fear of making mistakes. When you're trying to speak English, it's easy to feel embarrassed if you don't know a word or if you say something wrong. But here's a tip. Embrace your mistakes. Every mistake you make teaches you something new. Each time you correct yourself, you get one step closer to fluency. Think of it like this. When you learn to ride a bike, you probably fell down a few times before you could balance perfectly. Learning English is the same. You will make mistakes, but that's part of the journey. It's better to speak and make mistakes than to stay silent and miss out on learning. Solutions to building confidence. So how do you build confidence? Here are some simple steps. Speak every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Practice makes progress. Talk to yourself in English. Describe what you're doing or talk about your day. This helps you get used to forming sentences. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Use them as opportunities to learn. Shadowing. Listen to English speakers and repeat what they say. This helps you match their rhythm and tone, which will boost your speaking confidence. Practice with podcasts. Check out the beginner podcasts on my channel. These podcasts are simple, and you can practice listening and shadowing them to improve your fluency. Trusting yourself. As you practice, you'll notice something amazing. You'll start to trust yourself more. You'll trust that even when you don't know the perfect word, you can still communicate your ideas. That's the real secret of confidence. Not knowing everything, but knowing you can handle any situation that comes your way. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. Theodore Roosevelt. Confidence is believing in yourself, even if you're not perfect. When you believe you can speak English, you will find that the words come more easily. You'll stop hesitating, and you'll start speaking more fluently. Celebrate your progress. Finally, don't forget to celebrate your progress. Every word you learn, every sentence you speak, and every mistake you correct is a step forward. Learning a new language is a journey, and every step deserves to be celebrated. Here's a final challenge for you. Set a goal to speak English for at least 5 minutes every day for the next week. At the end of the week, take a moment to reflect on how much you've improved. You'll be surprised by how quickly your confidence grows. Thank you for joining me on this journey through my struggles of learning English. Remember, confidence is the key that opens the door to fluency. Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and soon you'll be speaking English with ease. You've got this.